Jim realized Director Sylara had crossed the line from professionally social to dangerously intoxicated when she grabbed his arm and whispered, "You're the only person in this room I actually trust." The crowd at the corporate gala was a blur around them, whispering voices, clinking glasses, and laughing faces. Jim's eyes scanned the room as he processed Sylara's words. He had seen her drunk before. It was rare, but always significant. Her blue-tinted skin now flushed deeper hues of pink from the excessive drinking. "Director Venkath," he started firmly, pulling his arm free gently yet firmly. "It's late, and you've been out for a while." Sylara blinked slowly at him, her silver eyes shimmering with something Jim couldn't place. She released an airy sigh that seemed to carry all the tension of someone who had held their breath too long. "James," she repeated his name as if tasting it. I need you to take me home." Jim glanced around quickly before nodding, keeping a careful eye on security personnel and guests nearby. He couldn't risk her saying something inappropriate in public. The repercussions of any slip could be disastrous for both their careers. "Let's get you out of here," he said softly but urgently. "Come with me." He guided Sylara towards the exit without drawing attention, subtly making his way through a throng of partygoers. They moved into an empty hallway where they paused briefly to collect her coat and bag from the cloakroom. Once outside in the quiet night air, Jim slid open the door of one of their company-provided vehicles, dark and sleek with tinted windows. He helped Sylara inside before following suit. The ride home would be a chance for him to keep an eye on her without prying questions or nosy colleagues watching. The car started moving smoothly through the city's night streets, lit by neon lights flickering in distant buildings. Jim sat beside Sylara rather than up front with the driver, keeping watch over his boss. She slumped slightly against the seat cushion and leaned into him almost immediately, her head finding a resting place on his shoulder. "You smell like safety," she murmured sleepily without opening her eyes fully. Jim stiffened at those words. They felt too personal for this situation. He looked down to see Sylara's fingers clutching lightly onto the lapel of his jacket, as if seeking some kind of reassurance from him that wasn't within reach tonight. His instinct was to push away, but another part of him hesitated. "Let's get you home," he repeated firmly yet gently. "Ma'am." Sylara shifted slightly in her seat and sighed deeply again, this time more relaxed now under Jim's firm guidance back towards reality, if not full consciousness entirely. She looked up at him with eyes that held a mixture of trust, something so rarely given, and vulnerability. Her grip on his jacket loosened, but didn't release completely. She seemed to need the contact, even while sleeping lightly against him, as they drove toward her place alone together in the car, both bound by their professional lines, and yet stepping over them now under the guise of protecting company assets. Jim kept silent vigil until he could ensure Sylara was safely at home, where no further damage would occur due to her intoxicated state or emotional vulnerability. When the vehicle pulled up outside Sylara's apartment complex, it seemed she roused slightly from sleepiness induced by alcohol and tiredness alike. She straightened slowly, as if waking properly now back into awareness of surroundings rather than dreamland inside Jim's protective presence during transit, her grip loosening entirely when he helped her out of the car. "Thank you," Sylara said quietly, standing on wobbly feet against the cool night breeze that nipped at them outside, this time after warmth within four walls, moving through city streets earlier tonight under his care, back from corporate events seen full with company faces, now far away again into distance once more by vehicle ride. I don't know what would've happened if you weren't here." Jim nodded, taking in her unstable stance and the clear signs she was barely on the edge of sobering up, yet still heavily influenced emotionally from drinking too much tonight, without usual self-control boundaries intact anymore thanks to Venkathy physiology letting down barriers when overindulging alcohol consumption. Get some rest, he advised firmly but kindly. I'll check in tomorrow morning. Sylara nodded slowly, her silver eyes searching his face briefly before she turned towards the building entrance with a last murmured phrase, "Good night, James." She disappeared inside, as Jim watched silently for moments, until doors closed behind her form, entering darkness of night within apartments walls safely kept now after event chaos earlier that day had brought them out tonight together under unusual circumstances indeed. He took one deep breath, then turned back towards his own place with thoughts swirling heavily despite the outward calm exterior he maintained usually at work environments daily basis here in city. Jim had taken care of Sylara as a boss and colleague, but now stepping outside formal roles boundaries ever so slightly, even if only to help out drunk boss needing assistance tonight. It left him wondering about the underlying dynamics between them that had never quite been clear before this moment, when she needed his protection more personally than professionally. Something rare indeed in their professional setting they both valued highly, always. The night was quiet as Jim headed back home, leaving behind a mix of emotions and unspoken questions in Sylara's wake. The cool night air seemed to sharpen Jim's senses as he followed Sylara into her apartment building, his steps measured and deliberate despite the urgency of seeing she reached safety without further incident or embarrassment. Her apartment was on the second floor. They took the elevator in silence, both aware that this uncharacteristic departure from their usual professional interactions was a product of circumstances beyond the norm. Inside Sylara's well-appointed living room, he noticed several framed photographs lining the walls. Most were formal portraits with corporate colleagues or dignitaries. One caught his eye. It depicted her younger self standing beside another Venkathy, a woman who must have been close family, possibly a sister or cousin given their similar features and shared bond through body language. "Sit down," Sylara mumbled as soon as they entered the apartment, waving him towards one of the comfortable chairs near the windows. She moved slowly to her kitchenette area and retrieved 2 glasses from atop a cupboard. He watched silently for moments while she filled them with water, but didn't drink hers. Instead, she placed it on the counter beside another half-finished bottle of what appeared to be Venkathy liquor. "You need rest," Jim insisted gently, after glancing around her living room again. "Let me stay nearby just in case." A shadow crossed Sylara's face as he spoke, perhaps a mixture of gratitude and concern that she was putting him out by asking for such help at an hour when most others would have long been asleep elsewhere. But the alternative, dealing with this alone or worse still risking further public damage to herself from overindulgence tonight. She nodded stiffly in acknowledgement. "Thank you," Sylara repeated quietly before heading down a short hallway leading presumably towards her bedroom area, judging by small light leaking through door frames ahead as she walked. Jim remained in living room observing briefly until she emerged again several minutes later, wearing more casual clothing than the business attire from earlier event tonight, a soft sweater and loose pair of slacks that seemed to fit perfectly. "Bedroom's right down there," Sylara said, gesturing languidly towards door further back into hallway. "Just make yourself comfortable here if you want. It'll be nearby just in case anything happens," he clarified once more despite her already acknowledging his presence for support tonight earlier at apartment entrance. She nodded curtly before turning around and disappearing behind closed doors, leading presumably down hallway to room inside, where she would likely sleep off alcohol effects through night's duration. Jim waited several minutes after hearing faint sounds of water running from bathroom, as if Sylara was freshening up despite state of inebriation noticeable now still. After ensuring there were no immediate emergencies demanding attention, he moved towards kitchenette area to make himself more comfortable, while also checking whether any obvious medical concerns might warrant intervention, such as dehydration symptoms indicating excessive alcohol consumption had begun taking greater toll on her system tonight compared earlier, where simply guiding back home and settling was main priority after events seemed left behind. "Would you like me to bring anything?" Jim asked softly, entering kitchenette now equipped with basic refrigerator supplies, likely leftovers or ready-made meals, since no signs of fresh cooking ingredients present except bottled beverages from early in evening during business gathering attendance. She waved off his question dismissively, though silver eyes betrayed a flicker of gratitude still evident, if not openly acknowledged. "I'll be fine," she assured him wearily, as Jim returned to main living room area once more, deciding against trying further persuasion on staying close beyond vicinity, already present now here, inside apartment safely reached without incident despite earlier night out scene. Instead, he settled into one of plush chairs near windows, where soft glow cast by city lights outside filtered through glass panes, providing modest illumination throughout space. For a time, Jim observed Sylara's living room once more with keen interest. This glimpse behind professional facade revealed far less overtly about personality or personal life compared public appearances made at events like tonight's gathering. Yet there were subtle clues visible here now in relative intimacy of her private quarters, framed photographs lined wall, showing familial connections and corporate achievements, but also small decorative touches hinting towards interests beyond business realm, such as plant arrangements along window sills, providing greenery contrast against modern interior or aesthetics chosen for home. After several moments, settling into comfortable silence broken only by occasional sounds from kitchenette area indicating Sylara's presence, still moving about inside apartment, Jim decided to check in briefly on her well-being directly. He rose carefully and made his way towards hallway leading down further back into residence, where bedroom door was faintly ajar, as if inviting him closer now out of concern over potential medical concerns remaining unaddressed during night's watch. "Sylara," he called softly, pushing open slightly so only peek inside could be seen without disturbing restful state needed for recovery at this hour. Inside, darkness behind threshold seemed to deepen further, revealing no visible signs immediately alarming needing immediate attention, though faint sounds of breathing signified slumber had begun settling over her, now finally resting after evening out earlier tonight. "Are you all right?" he asked again quietly, stepping fully inside bedroom area, where soft light from hallway filtered dimly through partially the open door frame. Sylara lay on bed, curled up facing away from entryway, with covers pulled snug around body, though slight flush still present along skin indicated lingering effects of alcohol consumption, yet settling gradually now under influence. "Rest. Just tired," she murmured back drowsily without turning towards him completely, her voice barely above whisper, but clearly acknowledging need for peace rather than interruption, even if concern lingered visibly in tone. Jim nodded slowly, understanding fully despite not entirely agreeing, given professional instincts advising against such complacency around potentially risky situation involving overindulgence and vulnerability shown tonight. "Try to get some proper rest then," he encouraged softly, knowing full well it would likely take more time beyond immediate hours before truly sobering up completely from earlier alcohol intake without further complications arising due lack of medical intervention given current state, now resting here inside private quarters rather than hospital setting where trained professionals could better manage such issues safely. "I will," Sylara replied with renewed determination, though exhaustion still heavy in voice and body language, rolling over gently to face him if only briefly. "Thank you for being there." Jim's gaze softened as he nodded back silently, recognizing mutual understanding shared implicitly here. Despite unspoken nature of agreement, appreciated his presence tonight, watching out, not just professionally, but also personally now beyond usual bounds. Workplace interactions, ever so slightly due circumstances that allowed such temporary lapse, formality usually maintained between them. He stepped closer until standing directly beside bed where Sylara lay partially exposed under blankets. Her blue-tinted skin flushed more prominently now compared earlier when they arrived home together after event. Jim reached out gently to tuck stray strands of dark blue hair behind ear before retreating back towards doorway again without further intrusion, despite urge growing internally to offer comfort beyond usual boundaries professional roles dictated. "Good night," he said quietly once more, glancing one last time at Sylara lying still now on bed facing him under dim light filtering through partially open door frame separating main living room area from private bedroom quarters where she would likely rest undisturbed for remainder of night's duration, allowing her to recover fully before returning normalcy professional life tomorrow morning. "Good night, Jim," she murmured back softly, eyes fluttering closed briefly, as if barely awake enough now respond properly given state still present effects earlier alcohol consumption causing emotional vulnerability breakdown tonight. He nodded once more in acknowledgement, despite faint sense of unease lingering unsettled within his chest, knowing full well such rare glimpse behind professional facade usually maintained between them could have profound implications moving forward, even beyond immediate aftermath. Evening's events now concluded. Jim turned and retreated back towards main living room area where he had initially settled earlier while waiting for Sylara to rest comfortably inside apartment. As he moved through hallway returning briefly down path leading out towards front door entryway, Jim couldn't shake off sense of lingering questions unspoken between them tonight that would likely demand further examination once sober clarity returned tomorrow morning. Yet as night fell deeper around cityscape outside apartment windows now darkened behind closed blinds, Jim found himself settling into relative peace, accepting current situation while remaining vigilant observer, ensuring no further complications arose during recovery process necessary following overindulgence earlier evening event scene. It left him with thoughts swirling heavily despite outward calm exterior he maintained usually at work environments daily basis here in city. Later that night, as hours passed and Sylara's apartment fell quiet under blanket of darkness, Jim remained nearby observing carefully from distance, chosen both to ensure her safety while also respecting boundaries necessary maintaining professional relationship moving forward. His presence was a constant but unobtrusive reminder of the unusual circumstances binding them together tonight, to bridge between duty and compassion that felt fragile yet essential. The atmosphere inside Sylara's apartment gradually shifted as dawn approached, bringing with it an uncertain sense of what lay ahead for both Jim and his enigmatic boss. As morning light began to filter through window blinds, casting a soft glow over the room where she slept peacefully, unaware of the storm brewing in her subordinate's mind. Jim had never seen Sylara this way before tonight. The night was almost over, but new challenges were already on the horizon. The confession and vulnerability shared by Sylara under the influence of alcohol left Jim with a heavy heart, torn between his protective instincts and professional responsibilities. He knew that whatever happened next would be crucial in defining their future dynamic, whether it reinforced boundaries or allowed for something more meaningful to develop. Sitting back down on one of her plush chairs, Jim took a deep breath, readying himself mentally for the morning ahead, where questions left unanswered tonight might finally seek answers under clearer light and sober clarity. It was with this mindset that he awaited Sylara's awakening from sleep, knowing full well their interactions would be charged by revelations shared in moments of vulnerability. The sun began to rise over the city skyline outside, casting a warm glow through Sylara's apartment windows, just as she stirred awake once more after hours of restful slumber. Jim remained vigilant yet distant, prepared for whatever awaited them both under this new light, determined to handle it with the same professionalism and care that had guided him throughout his career. In her bedroom, now fully bathed in early morning sunlight filtering through partially drawn blinds, Sylara blinked slowly into awareness as dawn approached, bringing in night's uneasy peace gained resting safely here inside private quarters. She looked around briefly, orienting herself before glancing towards hallway leading back out main living room area, where Jim had remained nearby, observing vigilantly throughout hours of slumber. "Jim," she called softly from doorway frame, her voice still slightly raw with sleep, but more coherent now compared earlier, when intoxicated effects were most pronounced tonight after corporate event attendance. He appeared almost instantly beside her, once summoned again, silently stepping closer until standing directly within room threshold, where morning light cast soft shadows behind him against walls framed by open space. "Good morning," Jim greeted calmly, noting how she seemed both relieved and slightly apprehensive under current circumstances still lingering aftermath evenings, unusual events that had brought them together in such intimate but uncharacteristic manner. "Are you feeling better?" Sylara nodded slowly despite slight wince indicating ongoing effects alcohol consumption left behind, now settling gradually within body after period restful slumber necessary for recovery. "Yes," she confirmed quietly, her silver eyes meeting his steadily, as if seeking confirmation of mutual understanding shared without words needing spoken aloud between them tonight. "Thank you." Jim's chest tightened reflexively at unspoken gratitude conveyed through simple gaze and tone. There was depth there he hadn't seen before amidst usual professional interactions maintained despite long familiarity, working together under same corporate structure now decades longer. Jim's tenure with company compared Sylara. "You're welcome," he replied equally softly, offering her a small nod in acknowledgement of mutual respect both owed each other, while also recognizing boundaries necessary maintaining moving forward given unusual circumstances that had brought them here today. "If you need anything else before heading to work, they'll be fine," she interrupted gently, with faint smile curving lips slightly despite lingering weariness still present under morning light's illumination now fully cast within room, where they stood facing one another again after nights spent together in private quarters. A felly reached without further complications arising. Jim nodded once more, understanding implicitly conveyed through simple gesture and silent agreement shared between them. There were questions left unanswered that would likely need addressing sooner rather than later given implications underlying dynamics revealed tonight. Under influence of alcohol, breaking usual barriers maintained professionally, always but now temporarily down due circumstances presented during event, gathering earlier evening scene where Sylara had drunk too much. "He'll be here if you do," he assured her sincerely, despite professional distance remaining necessary for ensuring no missteps taken jeopardizing company structure or personal relationships moving forward. "Take care of yourself." "Of course," she replied quietly but firmly, turning back towards bedroom area once more to retrieve items needed morning preparations ahead before facing demands day's schedule brought within corporate environment again soon after waking properly from restful slumber gained here inside apartment, safely reached under Jim's watchful eye throughout night's duration, ensuring no further issues arose despite overindulgence effects lingering, now gradually settling fully within her body. Jim watched silently as Sylara moved back towards bedroom area, retrieving basic morning necessities likely needed before facing professional demands soon after waking properly from rest, his presence remaining vigilant yet unobtrusive in observation duties maintaining until it was clear she would be able to handle tasks independently without further assistance required beyond initial help ensuring safety. Reaching here safely last night. "Let me know if you need anything else," Jim offered one final time as Sylara re-emerged briefly from bedroom area, now fully prepared for day ahead. Under morning lights, illumination gradually brightening within room, now casting more defined shadows against walls, framing open spaces leading out main living room towards entrance, where he had entered earlier night scene beginning. "I will," she assured him quietly, with slight nod in acknowledgement, despite lingering sense both of mutual respect owed each other, while also recognizing boundaries necessary moving forward given unusual circumstances revealed tonight. Under influence, breaking usual professional facade maintained always but now temporarily down due events presented during gathering earlier evening scene leading to overindulgence effects seen last night. Jim nodded once more, stepping back towards main living room area where he had initially settled awaiting Dawn's arrival, bringing end uneasy peace gained resting safely inside apartment after event gathering attendance early morning hours. It left him with thoughts swirling heavily despite outward calm exterior, or maintained usually at work environments daily basis here in city, now facing new challenges brought by revelations shared under influence tonight that would likely demand further examination moving forward once sober clarity returned tomorrow morning. A&D in her apartment, Sylara's barriers collapse completely. She talks about her loneliness, the pressure of leadership, how she watches Jim when he doesn't notice. "You walk like you'd fight anything for me," she slurs. "Would you?" Jim's chest tightens. "That's my job, ma'am." She laughs sadly. "Is that all it is?" He gets her water and doesn't answer. Jim's silence spoke volumes as he watched Sylara prepare herself quietly in the morning light, their professional lines reasserting themselves despite the lingering warmth of a connection glimpsed through alcohol-induced vulnerability. The day ahead promised no easy answers, but Jim remained resolute in his commitment to both respect those boundaries and be there for support if needed, whether it was under her command or simply as an old friend offering silent watchfulness. As dawn fully broke outside Sylara's windows, casting its golden light over the city skyline beyond, they stood at a crossroad, sown where professional duty met personal truth. The path forward would not be clear cut, but Jim knew that respecting and navigating these complexities was essential to maintaining their unique bond amidst the bustling corporate world around them. The morning air carried with it an unspoken promise of resolution or perhaps new beginnings between two colleagues bound by a complex web of respect, loyalty, and unexpected intimacy. As Sylara gathered her belongings for the day ahead, Jim's presence was a constant reminder that despite professional distance being restored temporarily, something fundamental had shifted in their relationship overnight, and it would be up to them both to navigate these uncharted waters with grace and discretion as they moved forward into an uncertain but potentially transformative tomorrow. A&D Chapter 3. The morning after the apartment was quiet, save for the soft ticking of an antique clock in Sylara's living room. Jim Walker had taken up a position on her couch, his back against one armrest and legs stretched out before him. He kept watch over the entrance to the main room, ensuring that she slept undisturbed through the night. Her door remained locked from both sides. Security was always paramount for someone in Sylara's role. As dawn approached, Jim felt a stirring beside him, a slight shift of movement as Sylara began to wake. He closed his eyes momentarily, taking deep breaths to steady himself before turning to face her gently. She lay on the couch that wasn't hers, but had been provided for moments like these. It was here she had fallen asleep amidst an ocean of emotions and revelations too heavy for one night. Sylara blinked rapidly as consciousness returned in full force. Her blue-tinted skin flushed a deeper shade, betraying her embarrassment at what might have occurred under the influence of alcohol. The Venkethi were known to become incredibly vulnerable when drunk, their telepathic sensitivities heightened, leaving them open and honest about thoughts they usually kept buried deep within. "Good morning," Jim said softly from his place on the couch across hers. His voice was steady, but held a hint of warmth that she had rarely seen directed at anyone other than himself or her in purely professional capacities. He stood up gracefully and walked over to where Sylara's coffee machine sat, having learned by now how exactly she preferred it made years ago. She watched him carefully as he prepared the drink, strong but not too bitter, just a hint of cream on top to smooth out its edges. The sight was both comforting and disconcerting. There were moments over the past few hours where Jim had seemed like someone entirely different, someone who might know her secrets better than she knew herself, when they weren't protected by alcohol's veil. When he handed her coffee, Sylara took it with a nod of gratitude, but also a sense of dread. "What did I say last night?" She asked the question in a whisper, more to herself than anyone else, yet Jim heard clearly enough from his spot beside her. "Nothing." "You'll repeat," came his steady response as he turned back towards the kitchenette area within her apartment, leaving behind an air of professionalism and silence that felt almost stifling. But for Sylara, it was also a relief, a reminder that while she had let down all barriers last night under Venkethi alcohol's influence, Jim still maintained his own carefully constructed walls. She stared at him as he returned to the living room area, where they both now stood facing each other across an invisible line of professionalism and respect. "You stayed," Sylara began hesitantly, but her voice was firm nonetheless, carrying within it layers of unspoken gratitude for how far Jim had gone last night, simply because she needed him there. It wasn't just about protecting a reputation. The fact that had stayed all through this time felt like more than that. "That's my job," Jim repeated almost reflexively. Yet when Sylara's eyes met his, her voice broke with an emotion beyond professionalism. "James." The way she said it made clear that there was something else in those two words, not just a boss addressing security chief, but someone seeking understanding amidst uncertainty and newfound feelings. He felt the weight of what she, he implied, even as he continued to hold himself upright. There had been moments last night, brief glimpses through alcohol's haze, they seemed closer than ever before, united by more than duty. Alone, under her apartment's soft glow during those hours after company events ended, but emotions still lingered long into morning light. Jim understood the gravity of that moment as Sylara paused, looking at him with eyes filled with questions she didn't dare ask yet. "Stop calling it just a job," she managed eventually, though there was no accusation in her tone, rather hope and perhaps even longing mingled together delicately within each syllable. He looked away briefly, then back towards Sylara, standing before him now, looking more composed, but also visibly conflicted between what had been shared under alcohol's influence versus the professional reality of their day-to-day interactions at work. "I'm here," Jim stated simply instead, trying to convey with those few words alone that whatever happened last night or its aftermath, his presence was constant in her life. Sylara nodded slowly as she took another sip from her coffee cup, now sitting comfortably against her fingers without trembling so much this early morning hour anymore. "Thank you for staying," were the next heartfelt yet reserved words out of Director Venkathi's mouth, directed towards Jim, who merely offered a small but sincere smile in return before turning his attention back to ensuring that nothing disrupted their temporary peace today. Jim's silence spoke volumes as he watched Sylara prepare herself quietly, amidst morning light streaming through open spaces within her apartment. The day ahead promised no easy answer. Suddenly, questions left unanswered by last night's revelations and emotions too raw to process fully just yet under sober clarity returned only now, beginning with first glimpse of dawn breaking outside window panes beyond city skyline. The professional lines reasserted themselves, despite lingering warmth between them from shared vulnerability seen through alcohol-induced openness. Yet Jim remained resolute in commitment towards respecting those boundaries, while also being there silently supportive if needed, whether it was strictly under her command or merely as old friend offering watchful presence amidst corporate world's bustling environment around him, both at work and beyond. As dawn fully broke outside Sylara's windows, casting its golden light over city skyline stretching endlessly before them, they stood face to face at crossroads where professional duty met personal truth. The path forward wouldn't be straightforward, navigating complexities between respect, loyalty, and unexpected intimacy would demand careful balance from both individuals moving ahead. But Jim knew that respecting these intricacies was essential for maintaining their unique bond amidst corporate challenges awaiting today, beyond apartment walls, now safely behind them once again after night's uneasy peace ended, with dawn breaking new horizon full of uncertainties, yet hopeful possibilities too. The morning air carried promise unspoken between them, resolution, or perhaps beginnings anew. As Sylara gathered belongings, preparing herself for day ahead, Jim's presence was constant reminder that despite professional distance being temporarily reinstated overnight, something fundamental had shifted within their relationship since last night's revelations, and it would be up to both of them now to navigate these uncharted waters with grace and discretion, moving forward into uncertain yet potentially transformative tomorrow. And Chapter 4. The frozen words. Morning light filtered into Sylara's apartment, casting a warm glow over the room as she stood before Jim, her silver eyes reflecting the turmoil within. She had regained some semblance of composure since their initial conversation moments earlier, but the weight of last night's revelation still pressed heavily on her heart. Jim watched silently from across the living room, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his mouth. The words Sylara spoke lingered in the air, like an unspoken truth waiting for its moment to be acknowledged fully. "I've been in love with you for 3 years," she began softly but firmly, each word a deliberate step toward the precipice of their shared reality. Jim's eyes met hers, and he saw not just Director Venkethi standing before him, a formidable figure known throughout the corporate world, but Sylara, vulnerable, brave enough to expose her deepest fears and desires. It was the alcohol revealing one's I already had, she continued quietly, looking away momentarily, as if seeking strength in the distance beyond his apartment. Jim nodded slowly, though he remained motionless otherwise, absorbing the weight of what she said without a word. The coffee cup still suspended between them seemed to encapsulate everything unsaid, and yet so heavily laden with meaning that it threatened to spill over at any moment. Sylara took another sip from her own half-empty mug before setting it down gently on the table beside her chair. Her movements were deliberate, almost robotic in their precision as she tried to collect herself for what lay ahead. "Thank you for staying," she murmured softly, after a brief silence, more heartfelt than ever. Jim's lips curved into a small but sincere smile at those words. His voice was soft yet clear when he spoke him here. The statement was simple, unadorned, and yet it carried all the weight of his commitment present in her life through thick and thin, despite whatever boundaries might now exist between them. The rest of their morning was a delicate dance around the edges of what had been revealed. Sylara moved methodically about her apartment, packing a bag for work, as if following an unspoken script designed to keep professional distance intact while acknowledging there would be no going back entirely after this night's revelations. Jim remained quietly supportive, but kept his own boundaries clear, his presence constant yet respectful of the space she needed. Sylara glanced up from where she stood at her kitchen counter, arranging last-minute documents into a neat pile before slipping them inside her briefcase. "You don't need to stay if you have other plans," she offered gently, almost apologetically. Jim shook his head firmly. "I'll go with you," he replied without hesitation. There was no room for doubt in those 3 words. They were the embodiment of a new understanding between them, a recognition that while their roles might remain unchanged outwardly, an invisible thread had been drawn through last night's honesty and mutual respect. Sylara nodded slowly, appreciating his steadfastness, even as it challenged her own sense of propriety. She stepped closer to him then, placing one hand on his shoulder briefly in a gesture both reassuring and acknowledging of the shift they were navigating together without words. "I understand," she said quietly, but with conviction. "Just get through today first." As dawn fully broke outside Sylara's windows, casting its golden light over city skyline stretching endlessly before them, they stood face to face at crossroads where professional duty met personal truth. The path forward wouldn't be straightforward, navigating complexities between respect, loyalty, and unexpected intimacy would demand careful balance from both individuals moving ahead. Jim watched as she gathered herself once more to prepare for the day beyond her apartment walls. He moved quietly but decisively behind her, readying himself to accompany her out into their shared world where everything felt at once familiar yet utterly transformed by last night's truths and this morning's quiet promise of something different beginning between them. Sylara's movements were a blend of careful precision and unspoken grace as she slipped on her jacket, tucking loose strands of dark blue hair behind an ear before turning back to face Jim squarely. "Ready?" Her voice was steady now, carrying only the faintest hint of emotion beneath its surface control. Jim nodded in response, offering his arm in silent solidarity, though it seemed unnecessary. They both understood its deeper significance as a symbol of mutual support and unspoken commitment moving forward into an uncertain yet hopeful tomorrow filled with possibilities neither had foreseen until last night's revelations began to thaw their professional ice. The morning air carried promise unspoken between them, resolution, or perhaps beginnings anew. As Sylara gathered belongings, preparing herself for day ahead, Jim's presence was constant reminder that despite professional distance being temporarily reinstated overnight, something fundamental had shifted within their relationship since last night's revelations, and it would be up to both of them now to navigate these uncharted waters with grace and discretion, moving forward into uncertain yet potentially transformative tomorrow. And as dawn broke, Sylara and Jim stood together in her apartment, a strange mix of calmness settling over them as they prepared for another day filled with uncertainty. The events of the previous night had left an indelible mark on both of their minds and hearts, making it impossible to go back to how things were before. Sylara finished packing her briefcase, her movements precise yet tinged with a sense of vulnerability that was uncharacteristic for her usually composed demeanor. She turned towards Jim, who stood quietly nearby, his presence both reassuring and comforting. "I understand," she said softly but firmly. "You just get through today first." Jim nodded in agreement, understanding the gravity of their situation without needing to speak further about it. They made their way out into the early morning light, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them at work. Upon arriving at Sylara's office tower, they found a tense atmosphere brewing within the company corridors. As employees started trickling in for the day's meetings and assignments, there was an undercurrent of whispers that spoke about last night's event, a rare occurrence where Director Vankith had seemed uncharacteristically vulnerable. Sitting at her desk later on, Sylara received a call from Krathian, one of her most formidable rivals within the corporation. The call interrupted what little peace she and Jim were trying to maintain in preparation for their day's work. "Director Vankith," Krathian's voice was sharp and cutting over the intercom system as he entered Sylara's office without invitation. "You should know that some of your, let us say, indiscretions from last night have been recorded." Sylara stiffened in her chair, her eyes narrowing slightly at his unannounced intrusion and insinuation. She knew she needed to stay calm and professional. "Krathian," Sylara replied coolly, keeping her voice steady despite the tension building within her chest. "I am aware of your penchant for collecting compromising information about my colleagues and superiors alike." Jim stood beside Sylara protectively as he noticed the darkening flush on Krathian's skin, a telltale sign that his emotions were escalating rapidly. "Oh, but you see," Krathian continued with a malicious smile, "this is different. These are your deepest secrets, Vankith. A truth revealed only through alcohol's grip." His eyes gleamed malevolently at Jim. "I have the evidence to back up my claims." Sylara's hand tightened around her calm device, but she maintained her composure. She knew that while Krathian could be ruthless and unscrupulous, he was not one who liked confrontation head-on. "I'm sure you do," Sylara said evenly, glancing briefly at Jim for support before turning back to face the screen displaying Krathian's smug expression. "But let me remind you that such actions are against company policy." "Policy is written by those in power," Krathian snapped back. "And your position is precarious right now." Jim stepped forward, his military background kicking into gear as he assessed the situation with cold efficiency. His voice was calm, but firm as he addressed Sylara first. "I will handle this," Jim said quietly to her ear, making sure only she heard him. Sylara nodded once in acknowledgement and gave Krathian a steely look that held no room for negotiation or backtracking. "Do not make the mistake of underestimating me, Krathian. Your little stunt ends here." Krathian sneered openly at Sylara's boldness before his eyes flicked to Jim standing beside her, gauging him as a potential threat rather than just another security guard or subordinate. "Very well," he spat out finally, after assessing their combined stance. "Come see me in my office later if you wish to retrieve what I have." With that cryptic statement, and one last look of disdain towards both Jim and Sylara, Krathian terminated the communication abruptly. Jim waited for a moment, until it was clear no further confrontation would ensue, then turned his attention fully back to Director Vankith. His demeanor remained steadfastly professional, but there was an unmistakable undercurrent of protective resolve in his eyes as he addressed her concerns privately yet directly. "I'll go retrieve those recordings," Jim said firmly, already moving towards the door before turning slightly at Sylara's desk again. "This never happened." Sylara nodded appreciatively. Even if she understood, there was still a long road ahead to ensure such incidents wouldn't jeopardize their mutual trust and respect further down line. Navigating Krathian's office required careful planning rather than outright confrontation, so Jim approached the situation with calculated precision. He knew Krathian well enough from years of corporate interactions to know when bluffing could work in his favor. Once inside, he faced Krathian's smirking figure directly, without hesitation, speaking clearly and decisively yet keeping just a touch of military formality that subtly underscored both respect for rank while also hinting at an unyielding resolve towards securing the recordings back from him. "You know I can make your life hell on this floor." And more, Jim threatened quietly but meaningfully. "Let's not test whether you want to see what happens when someone pushes too far." Krathian's eyes narrowed, a flicker of genuine concern crossing his face before he masked it quickly with a smirk once again. However, the brief moment had been enough for Jim, who recognized vulnerability where others saw merely disdain. "Very well," Krathian conceded finally, after taking in the quiet but undeniable threat beneath Jim's words and demeanor alike. "Your recordings are now returned." Jim took them back without further delay or exchange of words. His actions spoke louder than any additional threats might have done at this point regarding unwavering commitment to Director Vankith's integrity over corporate politics. With the immediate threat neutralized, Jim made swift return towards Sylara's office. Upon re-entering her space with collected composure, but noticeably less tension hanging in air around them now compared minutes ago, when confrontation seemed imminent, he placed recovered recordings carefully on table beside Director Vankith herself, who watched him closely, appreciating efforts taken today without needing explicit gratitude articulated aloud between them. "I'll go burn these," Jim said simply after a moment of quiet observation as to how Sylara might feel regarding next steps needed post-crisis situation resolved, but potential lingering issues remained concerning future interactions within corporations' dynamics, especially with someone like Krathian, who clearly saw opportunity here beyond simple professional rivalry. Sylara nodded silently in understanding, her gratitude for his actions obvious despite unspoken nature of acknowledgement between them today. She leaned forward slightly onto table where recovered recordings now rested momentarily before reaching out towards Jim's extended hand, still holding small device housing crucial evidence against Krathian that had been retrieved back successfully, under careful yet effective maneuvering on security chief's part. As morning light streamed brightly through windows behind them, casting golden hues across office space around Director Vankith and her ever-protective shadow standing steadfast beside her, both understood this was only beginning of new path. They were walking towards the road marked by respect, but now also carry an unspoken trust built upon mutual understanding from night before that allowed for such actions today, without needing explicit words spoken aloud amidst professional boundaries reign stated overnight. And with those final thoughts settling quietly yet firmly within hearts and minds of both Director Sylara Vankith and her trusted security chief Jim Walker, day's first light continued breaking steadily across city skyline ahead as they moved forward into uncharted territory filled with potential for growth, but also challenges unseen until now. But together, armed not just weapons or protocols alone and more, but something more intangible yet infinitely stronger, mutual respect born from shared truths revealed through vulnerability, under starlit sky and honored again amidst dawn's breaking promise. And morning light filtered through Sylara's office windows, casting a warm glow across her desk and illuminating the quiet aftermath of last night's events. Jim stood by the door, his mind racing as he prepared to face the woman who had been both an enigma and a source of admiration for years. Sylara sat at her desk, reviewing reports with meticulous precision, despite the emotional turmoil lingering beneath the surface. She knew what was coming: a resignation letter, or perhaps a stern discussion about professionalism and boundaries pushed too far by mutual indulgence under intoxication's spell. Either way, it would be an awkward exchange that she dreaded but expected. Jim took a deep breath before crossing the room to her desk. The air between them crackled with unspoken tension as he approached, his steps deliberate and measured. He cleared his throat softly before speaking, hoping his voice wouldn't betray the turmoil inside him. "Good morning," Jim said in a low tone that betrayed none of the raw emotion bubbling beneath it. Sylara looked up from her work, her silver eyes locking onto Jim's steady gaze for an instant longer than necessary. She nodded slightly and gestured toward one of the chairs across from her desk. "Please sit down." Jim took his usual spot by Sylara's side, but didn't make a move to claim the offered chair. Instead, he leaned against it with a faint sigh. "I've been thinking about last night," Jim began hesitantly, knowing how fragile this conversation could become at any moment's notice. Sylara set her pen down and looked up from where she had been staring pensively into space. Yes, her voice was calm, but carried an edge of guardedness. Jim swallowed hard, mentally preparing himself for what felt like the most vulnerable act had ever committed professionally or personally. He straightened his posture slightly, as if readying himself for battle before speaking again. "I have something important to tell you," Jim said firmly yet softly, his tone resolute despite the vulnerability behind it. Sylara's eyes narrowed slightly, her expression turning guarded but also curious. "What is it?" she asked gently, sensing that this was more than just a professional discussion about past mistakes or future protocols. Jim took another deep breath before continuing. The words felt heavy in his throat, as if each one had to be forced out by sheer willpower alone. "I've been in love with you for 2 years," Jim said slowly and deliberately, watching Sylara's face closely for any reaction beyond surprise. The air seemed to freeze around them as the full weight of those 4 simple but profound words sank into both their souls. It was like a bomb had detonated inside the small space they occupied together, yet no sound escaped either person except perhaps the faintest intake of breath from Sylara herself at hearing such truth laid bare in this unexpected manner. Her silver eyes widened slightly before darkening with unshed tears that sparkled there dangerously close to spilling over. She reached out a hand, as if she wanted nothing more than to touch him, perhaps for reassurance or some kind of confirmation, but hesitated, pulling back abruptly and returning her gaze to Jim's own face. "You're quoting me," Sylara murmured softly, after several long moments, filled with unspoken emotions swirling between them like storm clouds gathering over an ocean's horizon just before breaking into rain. Her voice was a mere whisper, but it held all the weight of their shared past, present uncertainties, and future hopes wrapped up neatly within its simplicity. Jim's heart clenched at seeing those tears in her iced ears that seemed to hold both relief and confusion intermingled together like the colors of sunset against stormy skies. "You said it better," he replied gently, not wanting to minimize or alter what she had once confessed under similar circumstances of emotional vulnerability. Sylara blinked rapidly several times, as if trying to clear away some unshed tears before reaching out hesitantly again toward Jim, this time placing her hand lightly over his own for just a moment. The touch was brief, but electrifying in its acknowledgement of mutual understanding and respect despite everything that lay between them, both professionally and personally now. They held each other's gaze unwaveringly, silently navigating the complex terrain of their new shared reality together. There were no promises or declarations made explicitly at this point, only a quiet recognition that whatever came next would be handled with care, precision, and mutual respect born from shared truths revealed through vulnerability under starlit skies. Jim withdrew his hand, gently yet firmly, as if setting boundaries for how far they could go while still maintaining the professional distance needed in their roles within Venkethi Corporation. Sylara nodded slightly, as if accepting this unspoken agreement, even though it made her heart ache to do so, knowing full well that Jim would always be there, not just professionally, but also privately whenever she truly needed him. In subsequent days, weeks, and eventually months afterward, the pair faced numerous challenges arising from their unusual relationship dynamic. They navigated professional complications with grace, yet handled personal ones delicately, as any two individuals seeking balance amidst intertwining paths ever so carefully must learn to do over time. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, many hurdles they encountered along the way together, Jim and Sylara grew stronger in both their resolve towards each other personally, while maintaining unwavering commitment professionally too. Their bond deepened incrementally day by day through shared experiences faced head on with courage, underpinned by mutual trust built upon that fateful night's revelations. On the anniversary of last night's emotional confession, Jim and Sylara found themselves once again seated comfortably within her office, though now surrounded not just by tension, but by warmth born from deepening understanding between them. There was no need for awkward silences or uncomfortable posturing today, as they had long since learned how to share this space together in peace. Sylara held up a glass filled with Venkethi Juiceon alcohol-free drink she favored now that their secret was out, towards Jim, silently prompting him to join her. He responded by raising his own glass containing only water and smiling faintly at the unspoken invitation before them both. To emotional barriers coming down, Sylara said quietly yet firmly, meeting Jim's gaze directly once again across from each other, now surrounded not just professionally, but personally too, in ways that neither had imagined possible back when they first met years ago, under vastly different circumstances compared to today's more nuanced reality shared between them, uniquely so within Venkethi Corporation. Jim clinked his glass gently against hers. To finally saying it sober, he replied softly yet confidently, acknowledging both the truth of their evolving relationship as well as its many complexities, that lay ahead still, despite everything they had already overcome together thus far since that night under starlit skies, when so much had first been revealed between them. With these words exchanged openly now amidst morning light streaming brightly through windows behind them, casting golden hues across office space around Director Vankith, and her ever-protective shadow standing steadfast beside her, both Jim Walker and Sylara Vankith moved forward into uncharted territory filled with potential for growth, but also challenges unseen until now. But Toj Thuren armed, not just weapons or protocols alone anymore, but something infinitely stronger: mutual respect born from shared truths revealed through vulnerability. Under starlit sky, they faced whatever lay ahead hand in hand. And